I'm Chris Cook from 3M Commercial Graphics, and in this video I'd like to share with you some tips on how to get the best out of the infrared thermometer that we use during the post-heating stage of our wrap application. Now, we've covered post-heating itself in a previous video, and so we understand the importance of doing the post-heating to relieve that shape memory that gets put into the film whenever we stretch it. And we know the importance of getting to that minimum temperature of 94 degrees Celsius, which is about 200 Fahrenheit, to relieve that shape memory. And if we don't hit that temperature, then the post-heating is not going to be effective. So that's why we need to use the infrared thermometer to make sure we do get to that minimum temperature. So like any instrument, it is important that we understand how to use it correctly. So I'm going to show you a couple of tips on how to make sure that we are actually measuring our temperatures correctly. Okay, now the first thing is actually just to make sure that we can actually point it, aim it correctly. Now they're pretty easy things to use. You basically pull the trigger or press the button and a little laser spot appears on the surface to tell you where it's measuring. Seems pretty simple. But if you actually have a close look at the way that they're manufactured, have a look at the front there. And by the way, while you're doing this, make sure you don't shine the laser into your eyes. While they are quite low powered, you still don't really want to do that. But what we'll see at the front here is that the little laser spot is up here, and just below it is the actual infrared sensor. The laser doesn't actually do the measuring, it actually just helps you aim the device. So we've got the laser up the top here, and the infrared sensor actually below that little plastic lens down lower. So what that means is that particularly when we're fairly close to a surface, there's actually a difference potentially between where the laser is pointing and where the infrared sensor is pointing. Now that may mean that when we are doing the post-heating, that we may actually need to point the laser at a slightly different spot to where we've got our heat gun to make sure that we're actually measuring the part of the panel that we are actually heating. Now in this case, the laser is above the sensor. So that means that when we're post-heating, I'll potentially actually need to put the laser a little bit higher than the spot that I'm heating to make sure that I'm actually measuring the hot spot on the panel. Now that can vary from one laser or from one instrument to another. We can see that on this thermometer, the laser is actually below the infrared sensor. So with this one, when we're using this, we're actually pointing the laser a little bit lower or below where we're actually directing the heat gun. You can try this yourself. You heat up a spot on the panel and then move the laser around and you'll actually discover where the sort of the hot spot is. Like I said, and with this one we will find that it's a little bit below, the laser spot a little bit below our heating point. Now this is really important because you can get yourself into a situation where you can point the laser where you think you're heating, but you're actually not measuring the panel itself. Particularly when you get to edges or corners. And this is a good example here along this top of the panel. I can be directing the heat gun on the corner there to post-heat that. If I put the laser on that spot though, I'll find that it's only reading about 30 degrees. The reason for that is that while I'm pointing the laser at the panel there, the sensor is actually measuring above it. So it's actually measuring probably over here somewhere. So if I do that again, we'll see that if I point the laser directly at where I'm heating, it's only reading about 40 degrees, but if I drop it down a little bit, suddenly I'm reading 110 to 120. So it is really important to understand with your particular thermometer how it works, understand where it's measuring in relation to the laser spot so that you can actually make sure you're getting accurate temperature measurements, because it is really critical that firstly we hit that 94 degree mark, that minimum, to make sure the post-heating is effective, but also so that we don't overheat the film and potentially burn the graphic or even potentially do some damage to the vehicle. So get to know your own instrument, understand how it works and how you need to hold it and where you need to direct that laser in relation to the hot air stream from the air gun. Okay, now the second thing we just want to go through with regard to the thermometer is how we actually coordinate the heat gun and the thermometer together. I'll see some installers that when they are post-heating, they'll heat and then measure, and then heat and then measure. So they'll do this kind of thing. They'll heat the surface, get it nice and hot, and then they'll measure it. Take the heat gun away. Okay, not quite hot enough, so they'll heat it a little bit more, then go back with the thermometer. Still not quite there. A little bit more heat. Okay, there we go, we've got to our 94 degree mark. The reason that they do that is because they're concerned that if we have the heat gun and the thermometer pointing at the surface at the same time, that the thermometer is only going to read the temperature of the air coming out of the nozzle of the heat gun, and they're concerned about getting inaccurate readings, so that they do them as two separate operations. But you don't actually need to do that. The thermometer will only actually measure a surface temperature. It won't measure air temperature. So you can quite accurately heat and measure at the same time. And you can see that this is going to be obviously much, much faster, and also I think more thorough, because it means you're not going to miss any section of the panel. Now, if you just want to confirm to yourself that it's not measuring air temperature, what you can do is just holding the button down on the thermometer, just pass the beam of the sensor through the hot air stream of the air gun, and you'll see that as you do that, it's not measuring, the several hundred degrees of the air temperature coming out of the gun. I'm just measuring there 23 degrees, which is actually the temperature of the roof up here. So it doesn't pick up that air temperature, it just measures the surface temperatures. So don't be worried about that. Doing it in two separate operations, it is much slower. You are more likely to miss parts of the panel, so do it in one nice continuous operation, and don't be concerned about measuring the air temperature. It kind of makes logical sense that these thermometers don't measure air temperature, because if they did, that's all they would ever measure. They'd only ever measure the temperature of the air between there and the surface. So they only do measure surface temperatures. Okay, so that's just a couple of simple tips and suggestions on how to make sure that we're using our infrared thermometer correctly. It is an important tool for our wrap application process, so we do need to use them the right way. Anyway, this has been Chris Cook from 3M Commercial Graphics. Thank you for watching, and once again, if you've got any feedback or suggestions, please leave them in the comments section below. Thank you.